Welcome. This is Dr. Brianna Willie, and this is my channel Business for Nerds with my blog of the same name. On my podcast and broadcast, we talk about different business concepts and nerd out and noodle about things. This time I'm trying to present, well, I'm not presenting today. I was going to present, but I decided we're going to have a discussion and we're going to stream to YouTube. I hope everything's working. And I wanted to add a disclaimer that this is not accounting, legal, or counseling advice, but the steps that we've identified that help ourselves and other business owners. Your steps may be different depending on your own business and your unique circumstances. Today on the show, I have my business partner, Wayne, and he has over 40 years of experience with fixing businesses and helping business owners identify and work through constraints. And he also wrote a book about this, amongst other things. So in preparation for this, I've been kind of noodling about what constraints are. And I've also, this may have been a bad decision, asking AI to kind of help me review the topic. I feel like I would have focused better if I had not done that. But my understanding of a constraint in listening to Scott Perry, my coach, it's something that hinders us from getting to where we want to be. For instance, I've been working on my own constraint, which is time management, having too many things to do. I also noticed in your book, Wayne, you talked about internal and external constraints. So, just kind of starting to talk about that. What are your thoughts about, for small business owners, so those are our followers, what are some of your thoughts about maybe internal constraints?
Well, internal constraints, first of all, if you're in business, okay, you have three basic areas of constraint within a business. That would be your day-to-day activities or your operations, your financial side. That would be, do you have enough money to operate, cash flow, and then administrative, how you manage your business. But in most businesses, the constraint is market oriented. In other words, getting enough sales, getting enough fees in to make a super profitable business. How you would describe a constraint is that, think about a chain. A constraint is the weak link in the chain. So if you were to say, okay, I'm going to pull this, or I'm going to wrap a chain around this, if it breaks at the weak link, then you have a problem. So let's say you're towing a vehicle and there's a weak link. You may be very upset when the car just goes up into the ditch, what you were pulling. So you have to look at a constraint as being the weak link in whatever you're doing. And if you think about a constraint would be, just think about, okay, I want to make $1 billion this year. Well, how do you go about that? So you'd have a lot of constraints to get there.
Yeah. But
constraint, the theory of constraints was actually brought into being with a gentleman by the name of Ellie Goldratt. Ellie was his nickname. He had a doctorate, and he basically came up with different concepts that just put businessmen on their ears. For instance, one of his was to take whatever you made last year net profit wise and make that, in other words, make your top line your bottom line within a relatively short period of time. So your total sales, even after your salary, to make that your bottom line, you would have that much left over. So it gets you into a methodology of thinking. So if a small business did 80,000 last year or 100,000 last year.
Yeah, I need examples.
And so basically,
and that's profit?
No, That was their revenue, very
Okay.
small business. And
Okay.
so they made 40,000, which they took out in a salary. Okay.
Okay.
It's saying to make 100,000 what you made in salary, and then to put into place everything else you need to make that happen. But he was doing it with major companies. So he had a group, and he's deceased right now. He had a group that he took that was doing over $1 billion a year in sales, but they had an $80 million net profit. So it rearranges your thinking when you have to figure, well, I'm going to have $1 billion in net profit. What do I have to do to get there? So the very methodology increases your thinking. You're saying, okay, it makes you think outside the box. So that's what I'm saying. But most businesses have constraints. Most people's lives have a constraint. Well, why can't you have this? Well, because of this. So there's a constraint there. And you
Mm,
have to look at what that could be.
mm-hmm.
So, but in business,
Yeah.
basically, what you have is the constraint. Let me pull up some of my notes here.
Yeah.
Basically, so what you have is in business, what your goals have to be is to increase revenue and throughput. Throughput is if you're in a business where you have cost of goods like retail or manufacturing, throughput means that you increase the margin after you deduct whatever the cost of goods might be. So in business, what you're looking to do is typically generate more sales and increase throughput, meaning in traditional financial accounting, under generally accepted accounting principles, what we have is that direct costs include labor and include materials and include a variety of other things. But with constraint accounting, basically what you do is you take the sales number minus the cost of goods, and that gives you a number, and labor becomes sort of a fixed cost in the methodology.
I'm a little confused, and you know that I come from more of a, a counseling background. I built my business. I had to kind of teach myself as I go. So I think I understand some of these concepts, but they're called
Well,
different things to me. So what's a
if you take
throughput again?
a therapist in your business, your accounting would typically be that you would have sales, and then basically you have overhead at cost. So you would have
Mhm.
other therapists and you and so on. So it would already be similar kind of math. Okay. However, if you're in construction or manufacturing or a retail operation, you would deduct the cost of the goods that you sell first, and that gives you a number, and that is called throughput. But
Okay.
what
So does
you have,
throughput mean like
you
you
already
have
have,
your
you
profit, you have,
no, you would have
what?
your gross sales, your
Yeah.
revenue, minus the cost of goods or cost of manufacturing, and that gives you a number, and that is throughput. Now with you, your top line is basically whatever your sales are, then it's pretty much administrative costs. That's the way that it would be calculated. And that's the way the industry does it because I have the metrics for that. So what you would have is your cost, and then your deductions would be for other people and yourself and so on. But the bottom line behind all this is the constraint is whatever is prohibiting you to achieve your vision pretty much. And
Mhm.
what you have to do is identify the constraint, and then you have to either manage it or remove it. Now, why would you have to manage a constraint? It may be something that you just can't fix. It's caused by outside forces, and you
That would
can't.
be an external
Yeah.
constraint. Because I looked at your book and it looks like there's internal constraints versus external.
So if you have
Most,
an external constraint, let's say suppliers that are
Mhm.
supplying you and they're slow, okay, you're going to have to manage that in order to get your income up. So how do you do that? And you have to figure out different ways. Now, on the other side, if you want to sell more and getting outside of the therapy business into more or less coaching, let's say
Mhm.
you have a client that uh, is trying to sell more, but there are constraints with who he wants to sell to, he or she wants to sell to. And what happens is that you have to come up with a unique offer. For instance, if you put whatever they're buying right across the street from them, that would give you an edge over your competitors, because all you'd have to do is have someone walk across the street and deliver whatever. So
Mhm.
it's a unique way of looking at different things. It's sort of an out of the box situation.
Like blue ocean marketing. It sounds like you're
Right.
kind of tapping into that a little bit. That it's, though there is some fighting over leads, not actually fighting, but there's some competition for leads. But if you get into more of the blue ocean uh, marketing, which I still am trying to wrap my head around, there are a lot of concepts associated with it. But you get into that area where you've found a unique area to market to maybe your ideal client, that tons of people aren't fighting over those ideal clients.
Well, a way
Um,
to think about this from a constraint standpoint would be, and we call it the mafia offer, not meaning that we're criminals and we're making an offer they can't refuse. But if you think about whoever you're dealing with, if you made them an offer they couldn't refuse because it was so good, you're going to get the sale. So instead of thinking about it from a derogatory standpoint, think about it from the standpoint of what could I offer that would be so appealing to people that I would get a lot of sales because of the offer itself.
mhm,
So that's just one way of looking at it.
mhm,
So the other side of the coin is that you need a marketing system. And let's talk about duck hunting for just a minute. Um, if you had a marketing system where it brought all the ducks in, meaning customers, potential customers, and they were all out in the field, so you have hundreds of ducks sitting out there, how difficult would it be for the duck hunter to get a duck? Okay, same thing has to do with sales. So if marketing, however you're getting leads, however you're getting clients or customers, however you're getting them, if the offer is so appealing that they just line up, that is the perfect way to do marketing. Then sales job, meaning, is just to simply go out and collect the ducks. All right. So
mhm,
it's a different way of thinking about different things. But with constraints, first of all, you have to decide on the goal of the system. What's your overall goal in your business and whatever you're doing? Or
mhm,
if it's a process, what's your overall goal for a process as a part of the business? So you decide on the goal of the system, your business. What's my goal? And then
mm,
you have to determine how you measure that, the system's performance measures. How do I measure this? Okay, I have a goal. How do I measure my advancing toward that goal?
mhm,
In some industries, like construction industry and certain manufacturing, you have a percentage of completion tracking, meaning you have a budget for the project
mhm,
and you have a time frame for the project. Then if you measure it on a weekly basis and you get into the fourth week and you've discovered that you've already spent 25% of the budget and you're only 15% of the way there, you
Ah,
know you've got a problem.
right.
So the second step is you need to determine the system's performance measures. How do you measure what you're doing and your track of getting there? And
Mm,
then you have to identify the constraints. What's the true bottleneck of you getting there?
mm.
So what is it? And in a vast majority of the places in business, it's market oriented.
What does
But
that mean? Market
what,
oriented.
what it means is you haven't defined a way to get enough sales. So you have to streamline what you're doing to get more sales. So you have to determine what the true bottleneck might be. And in that case, it would be your marketing system.
Mm,
Uh, get
mm.
people to line up. Okay.
Well, like looking at, for instance, our business, I often market that. I have a marketing map. You've probably seen it. And I look at the analytics after I market something. So how many people are interacting with this content? Where are they interacting with it? What's working, what isn't working? Is that kind of what you're saying as like, say it's not working or some part of it isn't, that would be an example of a constraint?
Well, also what we have is an operations analyzer that nobody else has. So traditional coaches and traditional management consultants go in and conduct an analysis. They take a look at the business and they determine what's there and what needs to be fixed. And then they place a dollar figure on that, whatever it is. And it takes them days. And in major companies, it can take 3 to 6 weeks, a team of 10 people.
Mhm.
The analyzer we have will do that very quickly, and it'll do it both on a year-to-date basis and an annual basis, meaning last year. And it gives a number of the amount of savings that could be brought in based upon that industry,
Mhm.
which nobody really does. And that range has to do with the average of the industry and the best in the industry. So you
Mm.
have an actual dollar figure that nobody else can do. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
And the other side of the coin is constraints and constraints models. Our constraint model analyzer is such that it it pretty much you have to put in your capacity. For instance, we had a company that uh, I was looking at 4 years ago. It was a retail company, a major company with $5 billion in sales. And I ran it through bankruptcy analyzer, which has 5 statistical probability models. And I'm going to come back to constraints in a minute.
Mhm.
And what it said was the company was going to go bankrupt in 2 years. And the company was at the time trading at $22 a share. And by the end of a year and a half, it was at $2 a share. And they ended up declaring bankruptcy, and they brought in a capital group from Wall Street, bought them out.
Mhm.
But what they had was they had a major problem with, and these were published. I'm not going to name the name of the company because there's a lot of activity on this. But they said that at $5 billion, that they were only 41% of their sales capacity, which was $13 billion. However, when you put it into our analyzer and you look at that, what happens is they topped out at, let me see, it was, okay, they topped out at 47.77%. Realize where they started was at 41.56%. So there's no way, and that was part of their problem. They needed to expand their facility structure and their warehouse structure in order to handle even this little bit in sales. So then when you get through that constraint,
So that was the constraint. They didn't have enough capacity to build whatever they were building to be able to sell
they
it.
didn't have the capacity either in products, services, buildings. But even if you fix that, they had a labor situation. They were already at 95, they were at 83.5% of their labor capacity. And
Mhm.
you in retail, you can't have, okay, I'll expand capacity, I'll put on a second and third shift. You can't do that in retail. There are only certain operating hours for stores. Okay.
Mhm.
So what happened is, even if you fix the facility and the warehousing and the product side, they would still have to train more people and get more people in. They need more locations
Which is
because,
going to cost money.
which was going to cost money. So
Mm.
basically, they were kind of in a catch-22 situation. And that's why they ended up going bankrupt. They didn't know what to address.
Oh,
And now they're privately held now by a major Wall Street group. And I don't even know if they'll be able to make it successful with their current thinking. So
yeah.
they'll end up having to close a lot of stores, the
I think
unprofitable stores.
I think that's really helpful, but right now most of our followers are very small.
Right.
So
Well,
they're
it doesn't make any difference, the size.
okay.
Okay.
So this
It's
could be applied to, like, say, one business owner who doesn't have employees yet. Um,
probably their constraint is marketing orientation, getting in enough fees or
Mhm.
revenue in the initial beginning phases. Okay.
Yeah, because many of us, again, I'm learning about many of us aren't going to scale to the point of being, a billion-dollar company or whatnot, because that takes a lot of energy and resources and that type of thing. Many of us are going to stay just small businesses, I think. But getting becoming successful with our small businesses and maybe hiring a few people if we want, but keeping it kind of small and contained. I think many of us have that kind of goal. Um,
Well,
so,
it all starts with, in constraints, what's the goal?
mhm,
Okay. So you have to have a goal and you have to have a vision, and it needs to be a stretch. It has to go beyond what you just think you can do. And
mhm,
then what you do is you put in place steps to get there. So there's always a constraint. People have constraints in their lives and people have constraints in their business.
right.
And you get through one constraint, you may run into another.
Like the
But you,
pandemic was a constraint for many of us. Though some of us, we were able to turn it into, we were able to work with it. Like I went online, that helped my work life balance. So I was able to hone it. And yes, there were still problems, but maybe, like you were saying, managing a constraint. Did I manage a constraint when I did that?
well, you did, because you were face to face and you came up with a way to overcome your problem in that you couldn't get people in face to face.
Hmm.
So that was a constraint that you overcame.
We
Okay.
pivoted.
Yeah. So you pivot. And what a lot of people don't realize is traditional business, you can do a lot of things and people are doing it. More and more people are going online.
Hmm.
So what we have is you can do coaching, determine without showing up at a client location exactly how much you can save them. Uh, to
Yeah.
contribute to the bottom line, we can do that because we have industry specific numbers. And most people
Hmm.
don't have, well, 99.9% of companies don't have that. So you could take any company. It
What
doesn't,
made what inspired you to build, so what is it called, a constraint analyzer? What inspired you to
well,
build?
what inspired me to build that is that I watched all these consulting firms. One, they charge clients a whole lot of money to show up and conduct an analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So it could be $5,000. It could be $100,000. It could be $250,000 for a major company. It could be as much as $500,000 for a whole bunch of people to show up and come up with numbers. And I don't care what their numbers are. Based on industry, this is the best in that industry. Those the numbers we have and the average of the industry. So if someone's below average, there'll be a differential between where they are just the average. And if they're above average, then they would want to be the best in their industry.
Mm-hmm.
So there are
Now,
a lot of
how do you, so without giving away your trade secrets, so don't answer if that gives that away, but so how do you keep it updated? Because don't some of those things change?
well, they do. You see, the banking system has industry averages. That's how they determine, for instance, if you're in the construction industry in certain cities, you
Mhm,
probably can't even get a loan because
mhm.
in those cities, they've had too many builders go under. Now, in
Ah,
other cities, you can get a loan very easily. So the bottom line is they have industry averages as a part of their banking decision module. I built at
mm,
one time a loan decision module for banking. And so that is, in other words, so they are using the average industry numbers. And it could be anything from a grocery store to a chip manufacturer to a real estate management company. They're all in there.
mhm,
So you can do all of that. What they don't have is the best in the industry. So what we
mhm.
did was we found out who the best in the industry was, what their numbers were, and you have to keep this up.
Oh, so you analyze a present company that is the best in the industry, and you are taking other companies and kind of comparing it to give them the possibility type of thinking, like this
what
is
we
what's
use
possible.
is both income tax statements is where we get it from, and it's the banking system.
Hmm.
The same place that the banking system gets their numbers, we get our numbers, and they're very, very accurate. They're based upon income tax statements, they're based upon actual performance numbers out of banking, and it's based upon um, moving targets. So they also have the best in the industry, but nobody ever bothered to tabulate them.
Mm,
So we didn't go with the absolute best, meaning 100%. We went with 85%,
mm.
figuring that the top 15% may have a different value proposition from what anybody else has. So the
What does that
exciting
mean?
part,
Value proposition.
what a value proposition means, you have a unique product or a unique service that is above everyone else that they can't match. So you
Uh,
have the best numbers in that industry. So we cut those out. We didn't take the top 15%.
because
So then
maybe
we,
they're in such a unique area that
right.
no one can replicate it. It's so based on like maybe their personality even.
Yes, that could be. So
Mhm.
what I'm saying is we left out the top 15%. So in any industry, we have from the average to the best in the industry, meaning the top 15%. And out of that, then we come up with numbers. The company is, let's say the company's doing 150,000 a year and they have a net profit of 2,000. Okay.
Mhm.
The average in the industry would, let's say, is 12,000 and the best in the industry is 30,000.
Of
Okay.
net profit.
Of net profit. So then this analyzer takes a look at each area, including sales and cost of goods and administration and other expenses, and it tabulates the area. So we actually we know which area they're deficient in,
Which would be the constraint
which
or
would
part
be
of it.
where the constraint is located. And
Mm-hmm.
then what we have are true numbers of now $8,000 to $30,000 of actual savings we can bring in through a coaching project or a consulting project. Now
Mm,
you can ramp this up into larger companies, and the numbers become very significant, and we can do that very quickly.
okay. I feel like I understand that a lot better now. Now, switching to more internal constraints, because I think many of our followers have internal constraints, including myself, um, which, we battle things like, I got some feedback like imposter syndrome, feeling like, we may know logically we have the training and the ability, but the getting it done piece it's difficult to get there. Like, how do I say a person really wants to create a podcast, but they have a lot of fear about it, fear of speaking, fear of maybe how are people going to react to that podcast or, and I've had some of this. I had to overcome some of my own fear as an introvert, highly sensitive person. Speaking in front of others, like, me 5 years ago would have been terrified to be live on YouTube, but I overcame some of that. How did I do that? I'm still figuring that out. But what
Well,
would you give for some advice on someone that has some imposter syndrome?
okay, well, what you first of all need to do on a podcast is do a mini plan. What is my podcast? What's it about? What am I doing? And so on. And then you need to come up with a job description of you as being the podcaster so that you have the where you're going to actually be going. So it's a podcast on what? Coaching. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So what you do is you write a mini job description of this is what I'm going to do. This is where I'm going. I'm not going into these areas because they're
Mm.
irrelevant, and I'm going to focus on this. And
Like, what
then,
is the point of your podcast?
right. So you have, first of all, the podcast to come up with a mini plan and the vision of that podcast. And
Mm.
then you need a mini job description of the podcaster, you, and what you do and what you don't do, because you can
Mm.
get off in the weeds
Yeah.
from where you really want to go.
Mhm.
And so you do that. And
Yeah.
in every organization, so a lot of times the constraint could be within you because you haven't planned it out. And you
Mhm.
also need to think outside the box. What new ways could I do this that would help me get more sales as well as generate a lot of interest?
Mhm. Yeah, that's really good. It took me about 6 months or more to find my voice in podcasting. And I had come up with the name Business for Nerds, but I didn't step into that who I was as a business nerd until more recently. So I think everyone's process is unique, but I feel like I changed my LinkedIn to I'm a business nerd. That's what I am. But I nerd out about other things. I think some of it is finding who you are too, who you are as a podcaster. I really like that, mapping it out. What is the point? Because you could end up interviewing people that has nothing to do with what you want your goal to be and where
Right.
you're going. And I think kind of in the beginning I had an idea of where it was going, but I had to step into it to figure it out too.
Well,
um
where we are is anyone in coaching could be highly successful just using the operations analyzer because you could park at a
Right.
mall and just go store to store. You could park in an industrial park. It all applies. You could do analyses of everything, every one of those. So your opportunity in coaching goes way beyond therapy. It goes
Mm-hmm.
into, okay, we have 50 plumbers in town. I can go call on plumbers, okay, and tell them where they should be.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, we have, uh, you know, storage facilities. You could just walk in and say, or call them or whatever. Or you could use social media to get, in other words, you could focus on an area in coaching and just go from there.
Mm-hmm. What's the difference okay, so an operations analyzer, is that a different analyzer than the constraint analyzer?
Yes, we have like 14 analyzers.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Um, and what we have in that is, let me, we have so many
Mm-hmm.
that the
Maybe
bottom
telling
line,
us what that is.
okay, we have a bankruptcy analyzer that
Mm-hmm.
offers 5 different statistical probability uh, models. And what that means is that each one of these are 72 to 80% effective. So if you have all 5 models, like we did on this NASDAQ company, say that they're going to go bankrupt, they're going to go bankrupt. Okay.
There's nothing to stop it?
Well, it would take an infusion of capital. Somebody could step in with a lot of capital. But
Okay.
normally, when they get to that point, they're going to let them go into bankruptcy and then pull them up if they want to take
Ah,
them.
I
Why?
see.
Why pay a lot when you could buy real cheap?
Oh,
Okay.
right.
And then we have the
Mm-hmm.
business performance analyzer, the one we mentioned that will actually tell a company how many dollars they've left on the table and that can be recaptured through coaching or consulting. And then we
Yeah.
have a specialized break-even analyzer with a slider. What that means is that it gives you current break-even, then it has a slider based upon the next area break-even. If you just took sales up, would that solve the problem? And then the third part of this model is if you adjusted administrative costs. And the fourth part is if you adjusted cost, meaning cost of goods or cost of manufacturing. So you
Ah,
can actually pinpoint how to fix the business just using a break-even analyzer.
so the break-even analyzer also analyzes constraints in a way.
Yes.
Ah, interesting.
And the
So,
business performance analyzer then pinpoints the area of the constraint. Is it cost of goods? Is it administration? What is it? So you're starting to pinpoint, and
mhm.
that results in dollars to the bottom line.
For a very small business, what would you recommend typically? Like they make 150,000 a year
You
or
could do the
so.
business performance analyzer, okay,
Mhm.
and that would tell them if they're within whatever specific industry they're in, whether they're average, better than average, or below average, and then how many dollars
Mm.
they can recapture. So you can do that. You could also do the break even analyzer, take a look at what would happen if you made adjustments. And then we have a
Mhm.
productivity analyzer, the
Mhm.
constraint analyzer that basically determines what's real and what's not. We have a resources utilization analyzer that basically what that means is you can put it all together and see where you are. In other words, you put in all the fixes. And then
Mm.
we have a sales trend
So
analyzer.
like and I need things broken down like examples. So like the if I change this, this will end up here
Right.
kind of
So you
thing.
can put it together. You can take the business performance analyzer, break even, and then plug in the figures where you want to be and see where you are from a bottom line standpoint, both annually and year to date.
Yeah.
And then
So it helps you predict the future almost.
Then
if
we
you
have a
do these certain things.
sales trend analyzer. It takes a couple years though, because you put in the sales month by month and it shows you where you're heading.
Mm.
So, and you can put in a goal and it can tell you what you need to do each month in order to achieve that goal.
So, and one of my questions was about, so I know we're talking to small business owners mainly, but some people want to scale. They want to hire like 8 people, like say they're a counseling business. They want to hire 8 people. They want to be bigger. They want to take breaks, they
Mhm.
want to maybe stop doing as much counseling and have their employees do the counseling and they do the administration. Do you have something that could help them?
Yes. Well, where you start is where they are with the business performance analyzer. And then what
Okay.
we do is we use the resources utilization analyzer to plug in, okay, we have these additional costs and so on.
Mm-hmm.
And it shows them what they need to do. Will then be able to come up with a sales number, and the break even analyzer would help on that. It gives you your break even for all these new people. You put them all into place. What's your break even?
Mm-hmm.
At what point do you start making money?
Ah, okay.
So you have numbers then to shoot for.
I see. Okay. That's really helpful. I need these real world examples to help me understand these types of things. I think many of us do, actually. Okay. And other internal constraints. I know you've written a couple articles about time management. When we were on our prior website, we wrote a couple blog articles. I'm kind of rewriting them now before we release them to put on Substack. But you were talking about present time
Present
consciousness,
time consciousness.
which is
What
like
that means,
mindfulness.
yeah. Okay, a lot of people have a constraint in their thinking. So what they're doing is they're thinking about, okay, what I'm going to do tomorrow, or I'm going out tonight, what I'm going to do, or next week, I'm going to go on vacation. And they're
Mm-hmm.
not focusing on what they're doing. And what we call not what they have to do is present time consciousness, because you can accomplish a lot more if you just focus. So you have
Right.
to think in terms of present time consciousness, what you're doing right now. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
I'm working on this. I need to get this done. And it starts speeding up your utilization of time. And then
Mm-hmm.
you mentioned if someone wanted to scale a business, then that's going to involve delegation. So, how do you delegate to these people? And you don't want to delegate something that they're going to mess up, that'll cost you money. So, you have to come up with a methodology to delegate responsibly to
Mm-hmm.
people.
Mm-hmm. Which you could help with collapsing time to target by training them really
Right.
well. Mm-hmm.
So we also have methods of how to analyze what you're doing. And there are methods that we utilize where you determine, okay, can I really delegate this?
Ah,
Is this necessary for me to do? So that takes some time. You have to go through everything they're doing and then determine,
yeah,
because there's going to be a portion of everything you have that you have to keep,
right.
like
Because only you
managing these
know.
people. You can't, okay, you have to manage them. And
Unless you train a little, someone who's very much like you kind of follows you. But, no one can be exactly like you.
exactly. So another side to this is a lot of people want to exit their business or they want to retire. And we have what's called a life strategy analyzer. So it analyzes both the personal, are there going to be enough funds to retire, or you want to go buy a cattle farm? Or, I mean, I've heard crazy ideas of what people want to do. And you have to say, okay, that's your vision. Okay, where you are, you want to do this in 5 years. And then you say, well, you're not going to make it. Or you say, this is where you'll be. You have to make these changes in order to make it. So you're able to do that kind of thing. And also in business.
Hmm.
So it sets up how you achieve in order to have a goal of retiring or selling a business.
Ah. And
And then,
sometimes selling a business involves scaling it to a point to be able to sell it.
yes, because a lot of people, when they buy a business, they're looking in terms of, okay, I'm not going to take her place. I'm going to
Right.
have to hire somebody to do that because I have two other businesses. So
Right.
they're going to look at, okay, what am I going to have to pay a person to, if I buy that business, and can I actually make a net profit? So they'll be
Right.
looking at that.
Mm-hmm. And you have an analyzer for that too, for like
Yeah,
mergers and acquisitions.
right. We also
Mhm.
have a indication of market value. Basically, many groups, a valuation typically costs 50 to 100,000, $250,000 to, depending upon the size of the business. Let's say it's 15,000 on the low side.
Mhm.
So what happens is that you get a valuation in, and it's based upon a lot of factors. But you can have an indication of market value to list the business because it's based on industry benchmarks. Okay, what does the industry say people are getting? And a lot of times it could be, you know, uh, 3 times EBITDA, earnings, you know, before interest, taxes, depreciation. So that may be what the industry says. So you can actually do that very quickly. So you could walk into a business and say, okay, just give me these basic numbers. You have a franchise, um, and we have over 200 franchises in there. Give me your basic numbers, and I'll tell you what I think I could get if we were to list this. So there's a lot of different things.
Well, how much money they'd make if they tried to
Yeah,
sell it, the
right,
whole, all the franchises and all of that.
right. So we
Okay.
have over 200 of those and 800 different business types. So they're just drop downs. You pick that and then you plug in the numbers, and it tells you what the indication of market value might be. Now you would have to bring in the operations analyzer to see where they're sitting on that scale, whether they're toward the top of it based on net profit or toward the bottom.
Hmm.
So we have a lot of things to solve constraints because many people want to get a feeling for what they could get for their business, but they don't want to shell out $50,000 to do that. And
Right.
we can do that very quickly with an analyzer.
Right. Interesting. Well, I think, well, we're getting close to the end of our broadcast.
Okay.
I'm thinking that I want to kind of study this some more and maybe meet with you again and talk about this further because I think there's a lot to talk about here. um, so we'll maybe do that. And
Okay.
I'm also talking with um, Elizabeth Walker about coming on the show and talking about podcasting. So we're trying to iron that out now. And so, yeah, a lot of good
Okay.
things coming up. And so we'll kind of end this. Thank you so much for giving us some guidance on constraints and how to work through those. And I think I'm going to write some more about this too as I try to face my own constraints.
Yeah.
But anyway, thank you so much, Wayne. And thank you, business nerds, for listening. And have a good day. Bye.
Bye bye.